Welcome to Meeples on Meeples, episode 72. I'm Andrew.
I'm Brian.
I'm Patrick.
We'd also like to invite you to come check out our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube page. Basically any social media, just come check it out. Type in Meeples on Meeples, we'll probably show up.
This week's game of the week is Loop Inc. by Eagle Griffin Games. It's basically it's a time travel game played out in 3 rounds. What you are is a travel agent who's trying to sell and advertise trips back in time. So, in the distant future, you want to go back and send people on the trips. So you have a player board with all of the chits and things you need to complete your trip. You've got the cards that allow you to take those actions. There's a scoreboard set out, and then you randomly draw cards and you set out a timeline. As you draw the number of cards you need, you'll see that they have events from the history of mankind, and you lay them out in order. So there's 8,000 BC, when the first canoe was built. Then it's 3,800, 3,500, 2,000, and you'll get different events each game. But this just happens to be what we drew out. On those cards, you'll see the year. You'll see how many points it's worth if you complete that trip, and then you'll see the components or the parts that you need to assemble on your or bring on your time machine in order to be able to take that trip and hopefully get those points. But we'll talk about that more in a second. Now, before we get too deep into the rules, a couple of things I want to say is one, there are a lot of pieces, and there's quite a bit to this game. It's fairly complex because of the whole time traveling aspect. So we're just going to do a brief overview. Not the most in-depth that we could, because that would take a long time. The second thing is, it sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. I think we can all agree, once we started playing it, it was not as overwhelming as when we were reading that rulebook going, holy crap. Okay, so on your turn, you can basically take an action, and then if you choose, launch your ship to go on one of the trips. Again, you can't do the trip until you have enough components. So taking an action means you can take one of these cards out here, and then you do what the card says. So if I want a wheel or the little pinwheel, I need to go to the garage, so I take this and I grab one of the components that I want. And then you put it on your time machine, like so. Kind of set it on that time machine. Next time it comes around to me, so I have that, I might say, okay, it all depends on what I'm going for. You get 3 actions in a round. So if I've got a pinwheel, okay, if I get a wheel and the blue periscope thing, I think it's called camera, then I could go on this one, and that's worth 6 points. So if I'm going for that, I may take another one of these, and this time I would take, and you put them in front of you, kind of cocked off to the side, and then I would take the wheel. Where are all the wheels, guys? You put them in the box. Okay, so I have a wheel on me now. Third time it comes around to me, again, assuming that if the pile runs out, I can't do those actions, I'll take one of these, and I get the blue thing, and then I'll say, okay, I've got the 3 components. I'm going to launch, because you can take an action and launch. I'm going to launch to there, and then at the end of the round, I'll get the 6 points, and I have all the components I need. Sometimes you might have extra components, in which case you get negative points. It says -1 on the back for every component that you took accidentally that you can't use. If you try to go on a trip that somebody else beat me to that one, and I've got those 3 components, I have to find something else to do, or I can do it again, but I take a hit, I get negative points because somebody else launched to that time frame before me, if Andrew beat me to it, for instance. Okay, so that's not too complicated. Take a card, get things, and then launch. The second round, though, okay, is that same day played again, but now there's 2 of me. Because in the future, another one of me wants to go back and earn more money for myself and whatever, because I'm, again, an ad guy selling time travel. So I have a second ship, and I keep my components that didn't go to waste from the first trip. And I have to take these 3 cards in the same order, but I get to take 3 more actions, so I get 6 actions total. So I can choose to do this first and do what it says, and then I can add a new card if I want. Maybe I want to grab one of these, and it goes tapped, so I know the straight up and down ones are my old actions, the tapped are the new actions. and I'll take that, and then and I'll put it. I get to choose which ship I want to put it on, and then I'll maybe take this one again, and I'll take that action.
But the biggest thing is with your old cards, you do have to play them in the order that you played them originally.
They have to stay in order. So I'm playing those old cards. That's why you kind of keep them some up and down, and the new ones tapped. And so I'll have all these cards, and then for the third round, and again I have all these components, and this time I can try to launch to 2 different things. Third round, I get a third time machine. And now I have to keep all of these in order. Because one of me is taking 3 actions. The second version of me taking 3 actions. Now I have a third guy taking 3 actions. So I get 9 actions this time. And I can launch to 3 different possible goals or whatever. And there's some other cards that let you kind of screw people over. Like you can also advertise. Which means if I advertise and say I'm going to take this trip. And I do manage to pull it off at the end of the round. I get an extra point. But you can pull a card that takes people's advertisements away. You can make people lose components, things like that.
The other thing is, to make it very clear, you don't take all these at once. You play either one card from your past or a new card, then it goes around the table, and then you have to choose one of your cards in the past or a new card until you play all 9.
And you can launch your ships whenever you want.
And if you can't play, your old cards have to be played in the order that you played them the previous days. And if you can't, it's not that you can skip over it. There is no pass we found out in this game.
You cause a rip in the time-space continuum.
You still have to play the card. But for example, if I have an armory and
say, "Oh, these are gone,"
yeah, and I can't, my next card is supposed to be taking something from the garage, and I can't do it. Well, I still have to play that card sometime during that day before I can play any of the other cards from that day. I just take a hit in my points for not being able to fulfill my previous day's events.
And if components are getting grabbed before you can get to them, and you take one of these is -1 point, if you end up doing this twice, and this is the whole game, all 3 days, then you'll get another one the second day, third one the third day, so it goes -1 point, -3 points for 2 of them, -6, and if you take 4, you're out of the game.
Yeah,
if you totally wipe yourself from existence or something.
You blank out of existence.
I know it sounds more complicated than it is.
It's definitely a game that if you play through it
playing
once,
things in order,
it makes a lot more sense.
And keeping track of where everything's at.
Okay, next what we do is we talk about components. Now this game it's a pretty basic game. Every player gets a player card that shows them what their ship has on it and allows them to play their ships each day. Pretty simple. Lots of little chits associated with it. Each player gets enough chits to represent their ship during the different days. Lots of little pieces also to represent what you can place on your ship. You have a scoring track, a location track where you're going to gain your items from, cards representing the time date that you're going to jump to, and then of course the cards that are representing your actions or what is occurring during that first time date. Very simple. The majority of what you get in this components is cards and the small chits. There's not a lot to this game.
Cards are that great quality. I mean,
yeah, they're fantastic.
We'll talk about that in our likes and dislikes, but I think this is the first time that people will hear something nice about the cards.
I mean, they're that linen quality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really good. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the player boards. You know, that's kind of cool that they have. You know, everybody's got their own player boards, their own ships, and everything, and everything's labeled well, which is nice.
There's really basic artwork, but it does exactly what it needs to do. It just gives you a slight image of what's going on, because in that time, this happened or this happened. It's not over the top. Even this stuff is pretty basic, but I like the color palette.
I like that it's not too busy, though.
Right, that's exactly right.
The component quality, I think, is pretty solid.
The one concern I have with components, because we do have a colorblind individual, the colored pieces for your ships, there is no way to differentiate one ship from another ship just going off of anything but color. So if you had plenty of ships out there, you could not differentiate the ship color from each other. And that's just a concern that I have with one of our members that is colorblind. I think this would become to figure out who was on what spot or who had what advertisements on what spot could become difficult.
All in all, when we played, though, I wasn't really concerned about who was here and who wasn't here. I was just concerned that someone was there.
Well, my point is, though, if you put your advertisement on, for example, you forgot where your advertisement was, if you were colorblind with this, you wouldn't be able to tell one advertisement piece from another advertisement piece. So that's my only concern.
Yeah, they should have some kind of symbol. There's one, actually, it's not inside the box. It's missing. Okay, well, there's one component that I love. Andrew, the tray, please do explain.
Yeah, basically, well, we don't have it, but there's actually a plastic piece to hold all the different components, and then there's a lid that actually fits down inside of it to hold it all tight. Which is
nothing spills out or mixes if you tip the
flip
box.
The game, you know, I carried it in like this, and all the pieces were still in the same spots, which is amazing.
That tray is one of the best trays I've seen
in gold.
Yeah, I've seen in a game, which is fantastic.
Which is about 3 pennies.
Yeah,
so
it's
every game make one 3 pennies.
I don't know, any other thoughts on the components?
Not
pretty
really.
simple.
Yeah,
not a lot of them, but they're very, very good.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about strategy. First and foremost, with all the components, the 3 rounds, 4 players at max, it can get very, very hectic very, very quickly. So, I mean, that's...
I'd say the first round, not so much.
The first
You're not
round,
going to run out of components then.
By the end of the game, with 4 players, you can have yourself in a bind real quick.
One strategy I would say is pick your cards in the order, knowing that you have to play those cards in the same order. Now you can play new actions in between them, but those cards have to come out in the same order every round in the future. So make sure you're picking cards that aren't going to totally screw you over. For instance, one time I had many cards, and then like one of the last actions I took, I placed an ad. Well, you know, if you have that way down on your timeline come round 3, all of these are taken as people have been launching their ships, and I have this card. I had to play an ad. I lucked out and was able to take an ad that I wanted. But, you know, if I had played that sooner, it would have been better.
That could screw you in the end.
Yeah,
really
you could lose because you get negative points every time you screw up the timeline.
The other thing I'd have to say is 2 things. Well, first of all, is to make sure that your first round, you might think you're just going to go for a point, but if you choose the wrong cards in your first round, let's say you choose 2 or 3 of the same item, because you're going for a very, very simple point system, you have to remember you have to play those 3 items in the same order, and you get lower and lower on chit numbers as you get towards the more advanced rounds. And every time you can't complete a card in the order it came, you get a tear in the space-time continuum, and you will get negative points or possibly out of the game, so you want to think of that. And one strategy that I had was during the second round, I loaded up my second ship pretty heavily so that at the beginning of the third round, I just needed 1 card and I launched him right away. My first card had several pieces, so I loaded him up pretty quickly and launched him second. And then my third ship only needed 1 or 2 things, and I utilized them on a cheaper card. So on my third round, I didn't score very well in the first round because I didn't play it very well. But in my third round, I scored several points very quickly because I loaded up my second ship so that I could take advantage of it.
That's true. You do keep components on your ship, which is nice. You're ready to go. And there's a card that lets you move things from ship to ship if you're too overloaded or not loaded enough on one.
That's something I wish I'd utilized more.
That's a definite
early on is get a couple moves, because once you get those 3 ships at the end, to have a couple move cards right away would be pretty handy.
Yeah, that's true.
Also remember, you can only launch 1 ship per turn. So yeah, you have 9 turns that last round because there's 3 of you running around. But if you wait until the last 3, you know, or all the way till the end, you have to launch a ship. And if you get to the last round, I think it was around the second time through the day when I only had 2 ships. I took my 6 actions and I launched, and I realized, I can't launch 2 ships, so I had 1 ship that just sat there. And then you lose it. You know, it could have been 3 points. I had everything I needed to go. I should have launched it earlier.
And the problem with it, you want to pay attention to other people's ships because you can screw them over pretty easily. If you know that they're going to go through a big number and you see that they just need 1 more piece and there's only 1 more piece of that on the board, take it. Yeah, you might get a negative point, but they can't get the point on the
Everybody
card.
can see the requirements so you can kind of tell what you think people might be going for depending on what they're putting on their time machine. So yeah, you can try to jump to it first or take the last piece that you know they're going to need. Yeah, that's true. What are some other possible strategies that you had?
I think there's, as we've said before,
it could just go on and on and on. I mean,
you have to play it multiple times.
But I think it's playing more against the other players versus some games you strategize by yourself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and it doesn't really affect you what the other players do. But with limited number of cards, limited number of pieces,
people taking the trips you want,
taking these, it's a very, very player-based strategy. You can't say, I'm going to do this, or this works great, because it really depends on how other people play.
And the last thing I would say is it changes even more because you have these specialty cards that come out.
The anomalies.
The anomalies comes out after each round.
Come after round, for round two and three they come out.
And so that gives you extra options that can really change the strategy.
And they're brought in random, so you don't know what your options are. Each game is going to be a little bit different, which is nice. All right, that brings us to our likes and dislikes. I'll start with one like is the components are fantastic.
Yeah.
We kind of already covered that. And the artwork on those components is beautiful. I love it. It's really cartoony and goofy looking, but it fits. It keeps the game really light.
Mm-hmm. The pictures and the things do what they need to do. It's not a graphics heavy game. You don't have to look at you just have basically. I looked at the picture once. I was like, "Oh, that's cute," and then I focused right on what I actually needed and the score.
And you know exactly what you need to do, how many points it's worth. There's no clutter, which is nice.
I noticed that the box is even made kind of the same material that the cards are made out of.
And that's one thing. We dog cards hard on our reviews. I don't think this is honestly one game that I have to say that the company got the card play for how much you use the card and how much you're going to have to replay with the cards. They got the card quality just right for this game. You can sleeve them, but I think they will hold up.
The cardboard
pretty well.
components themselves too are not. I don't think they're going to warp real bad. They're nice quality.
Your standard chip, like as far as thickness.
Right, but even the bigger pieces here, I don't think you'd have a lot of warping problems with them. Not that it would matter a ton, just because of the way the game plays, but in general.
The one thing I wanted to say that I like about gameplay, it is very competitive. It's not it's not like a Manhattan Project where you're playing solitaire, but it's somewhat competitive.
Right.
We're never going to review that.
Whenever you're paying attention on everybody else's turn, because what they do has a direct impact on what you can do.
Absolutely. So I like the fact that you're actually playing against other players, even not on your turn. The turns are pretty simple. I mean, there's options, but it's limited. So I like the fact that there's not a lot of downtime off of your turn. The one thing I still don't like is if you have somebody who is colorblind, this is going to be a difficult game. In some aspects, this is going to be a difficult game to pull off.
Mine, or just that one they could just ask, what color is that? It's just that one piece, really. I don't know if that's such a big deal to me.
It's also your ship. I mean, that's...
One thing I really like is the general, the theme, the idea of time travel. That's one thing that hasn't been done in games, and it sounds really complicated when you explain it, but it actually plays out very well. I love it when gameplay and theme kind of mesh together. It's like, oh, it makes sense why I can do this and why I have to do this, because there's 2 of me running around. Now there's 3 of me, and if I screw up, I get a minor penalty, and that makes sense, and with the theme. So I love when gameplay and theme actually go hand in hand, and it makes sense, and this is a unique thing.
I did just notice on the box that it does say ages 10 plus. I think this might be a little much for a 10-year-old.
It's pretty complicated.
There's a lot of steps. I think the more times you play through it might be easier.
The first round, I can understand 10-year-old could get the hang of that, but once you get to that 3rd round, it gets pretty hectic.
Maybe one dislike for me is it only plays 4. I mean, with 5 it would be crazy. I get why they did that, but since we usually have 5 in our group, it's going to be for smaller group, game group sizes. Anything else?
No, I think that's pretty good.
It's finally time for our reviews. We got a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being terrible, burn it, 10, buy it for all your friends for Christmas. So I guess I'll start out. I did buy the game. I did kickstart the game. I'm not even a fan of 0.5s, but I'm going to give it a 7.5. Just the only reason I didn't give it an 8 is because it gets a little too busy for me towards the end of the game. But other than that, it's very straightforward. The components are amazing. But just that little bit towards the end where it gets a little too hectic for me is why it brings it down just a little bit. But a very solid game. I would recommend picking it up.
Well, I'll bump you up. I'm going to make it that 8. I think I've not played any other games with this theme. The gameplay is unique. Fairly streamlined. When you see the components come out, you say there's so little to the game for how complex the rules sound, but that's all you need. I mean, the table layout isn't too cluttered or anything. It plays fairly quickly. I mean, even our first game was less than an hour of the full 4-player game, or maybe right around an hour, I guess.
Right.
No, I mean, I don't think there's anything not to like about it, unless you have to have a game that plays more than 4 people, or if you really need something for little kids or whatever. I mean, I've got nothing negative to say about it. It's just a little complex and overwhelming the first time. That's why I wouldn't go like a 9 or a 10. It is a little complex. The theme's going to scare away some people, or at least when you start reading that rule book. But once you play it, I mean, I absolutely loved it. It made sense. Everything clicked, and I enjoyed it. I felt I was always in the game, and I always cared what other people were doing. No downtime at all.
It definitely did have smooth gameplay,
Yeah.
which is nice.
I'm trying to listen to your guys, and I'm trying to think of mine. I'm going to give it a 7. There's nothing broken with it. It's a good game. It's a solid game. It keeps you active. It keeps you interested. The first play around, the reason I don't give it higher than that, if I gave it higher than that, I think a lot of people would jump into this saying, "Oh, if all of us gave it higher than that, oh, it's a great game." The rule book is a little bit wonky in some places. We had to look back and discuss it a little bit. I mean, it's nothing horrible. It's nothing huge. I don't want anyone to jump on that, but you really do have to pay attention to that rule book and go through it a couple of times before you sit down and play it. And there's a couple areas in there that we had to verify some things on. Nothing big, but slows it down. The other thing is, we didn't talk about really components, but the scoreboard has a little bit to be desired. I wish the scoreboard was bigger. It's a little bit hard to differentiate where your number is.
Yeah, the scoreboard's kind of terrible.
We didn't
agree.
talk about that in components. The scoreboard could have been a lot easier to read. There's ways you could doctor it up yourself, but it kind of loses something if you did that.
It is fun to look at, but in terms of actually reading and counting it out,
the practicality isn't there. I like the game, play it again over and over, but I think a good solid 7, good game played if you have a chance, has my that's what my vote is.
All right, well, there you have it. There's our review of Loop Inc. By Eagle Griffin Games. Please tune in next time and check out our next review.